Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Tuesday morning, August the 29th, to you and yours. Why is it only Tuesday? Can it be Friday already? Can we please just get to Florida State football? We got to do this for 4 more days. But hey, it's 4 more days where we get a chit-chat, so it could be worse. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. It's good to be with you today, even if we do have to suffer through just a little bit more of a week without Florida State football. Drew is on the other side of the glass. Looking sharp, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain, buddy. We're getting closer and closer. I mentioned it. We are about 4 or 5 days away from FSU football, but at least we are 2 days away from Power 5 football. We get a couple games on Thursday night. We might talk about that a little bit later. But, hey, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio and, of course, the TuneIn Radio app, our own WTSM app. Those are both streaming over the interwebs. The podcast is where you can find us on iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube, all sorts of different places. If you like the show, we'd appreciate it if you rated and subscribed to us. It's always helpful. And if you want to reach back out to the show, radio@warchant.com is the email address to do that. At Wake Up War Chant is the Twitter account to do so. And of course, as always, we can't do this without our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, all there in the heart of College Town. I mentioned it. We still got a couple days, and it's one of those things where you're starting to hit the finish line, and at the same time, you kind of feel like you've talked just about every angle you can. You've looked at this thing every way you can. We've done matchups on the show before. We did matchups on warchant.com before. You can go back and look at that video series. We're going to do matchups before the end. We're going to do a pick'em. We're going to do all these different things. But the one thing that I feel like we have not talked about a lot on the show is the Vegas spread for this game, which has been at about 7 points for a good month, 2 months now. It originally opened around 3.5 to 4, which, to be quite honest with you, I think is probably the fair number. I think Alabama, considering the pieces they lost on defense, a couple of the things they have to replace, both Scarborough coming back from injury, Jalen Hurts kind of being one of the more unproven tied quarterbacks over the last couple of years, it makes sense to me that they would be just a little bit better than a field goal against Florida State. They're always going to get the benefit of the doubt as long as Nick Saban's in town, and you don't blame people for that. But did you know that this is the first season opener as an underdog for Florida State since, I'm going to let Drew guess on this one. Drew, when was the last time FSU was an underdog to open a season? It's a lost decade game. I will give you that much.
Oklahoma.
No.
That wasn't an opening season game, was it?
No, that was week 2 of 2010. It was a rivalry game. I'll give you that too.
Was it Miami? It
was Miami in 2006.
Okay.
That's the last time Florida State opened the season as a dog. It's hard. I'm a little surprised, actually, that Florida State was actually favored by 4 points when I went back and did the math at Clemson a year later on Labor Day night. I was a little shocked to see that. But overall, they were a 4-point dog to Miami in that game, and now they're a 7-point dog against the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I'm curious your thoughts on this. Is 7 points a fair spread, or do you think it should be a little bit closer to what it opened at, that 4, 3.5, somewhere in that ballpark?
I think it should be a little closer. I think 7's a little much for me. I think if I was a betting man and I kind of looked at this game just, in an unbiased way, that would be a line I would think about jumping on. I think 7 is just too much. It's too much to give someone. They don't have the 2-3 point or however many point bump you want to give them for playing in Tuscaloosa. You could argue that Atlanta has some kind of a home field advantage feel to it for them as they play the SEC championship game there every year. I think they open up there quite a bit as well. But no, I think 7 points is a little too high. Do I think it's egregious? No. It's something that I can accept. It's not something that shocks me necessarily. Because you look back to the Alabama-Clemson game, and maybe Clemson was a little bit better team than Florida State was, and I think Clemson was a 6 or 6.5 point dog against Bama on a neutral field. So it just shows you the amount of respect that Vegas typically has for Saban and Alabama. It makes sense, but I think if I were to set it, I would agree with you. I would say 4.5.
And, when you look at some of the numbers for Alabama betting-wise over the last couple years, our friends at BamaInsider.com were able to put some of this together. Since 2012, Bama, is 6 games above 500 against the spread, 38-32, and I think it does have something to do with Vegas loves to give the benefit of the doubt, and should I say, the public also loves to give the benefit of the doubt, and it forces Vegas to shift those lines. Over the last 2 seasons, Bama's 18-11 against the spread. They're 26-10 against ranked teams against the spread since 2012. And by the way, you mentioned it. Last year, 6.5 point favorite on a neutral field over the Clemson Tigers, the eventual national champions. And the year before, they were just around a touchdown favorite to beat the Clemson Tigers at that time. Meanwhile, Florida State just is coming off a game on a neutral field where they're a touchdown underdog. Michigan was a 7-point favorite for most of the time during that game leading up to the Orange Bowl. But here's where it gets a little fun. Here's where I wanted to have a little fun with numbers. I wanted to see just how much, because it has not happened much under Jimbo Fisher, just how this team has performed as a true Vegas underdog. And, well, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. It's sitting around 500. It's 6-5 against the spread as an underdog under Jimbo Fisher. It's 4-7 straight up. That's where you really kind of check your definition of what do you consider a success in a game like this. And I know, especially for a season opener, especially as much hype as there is around Florida State, Alabama, I'm not going to say that the success for this one is anything except a win, because I know that's about the only thing a lot of people are going to accept here. However, Florida State is on a 4-game road streak against the spread as a dog, and last year as a dog they went 2-1 last season, and I think that's something that's a little helpful, because you can say you turn out the noise and you can say that you turn stuff away all you want. You can't escape all the media. You can't always escape SportsCenter. You can't always escape College Football Live. I'll bet you a good bit of those guys in the locker room knew they were underdogs to Michigan. I will bet you a good bit of those guys knew they were underdogs to Clemson in a game that they hung on and really should have covered the spread in that game, if not maybe even had a chance to win it outright. I'll bet you those guys, when they went down to Miami Gardens to play the Miami Hurricanes, knew they were an underdog. And they hung close in all 3 of those games, covered the spread in 2 of them. The mentality that Florida State, a lot of the guys on this team have been accustomed to being a hunter and not the hunted, which is something Florida State hadn't had to do in a while, I think is a little helpful in a game like this.
Yeah, I think for me, looking back on their past experiences and things like that, we've talked a lot the last 2 years of all the, this will be a rebuilding year and it'll get a lot of young guys a chance to get to play and get the experience in these bigger games and this and that. And we've kind of done that now 2 years in a row. And at a certain point, it's got to come into fruition. And what I want to see, as opposed to it being game 5 or 6 of the year after losing to a team you shouldn't, you want to see them come out in the first game in the first quarter and really play hard. Like, we don't need to get down by 22 points in an opening game, opening week. You can't do that against Alabama. It might have flown against the Ole Miss team, who turned out to be not very good, but we got to be ready to play from the get-go. You've heard a lot of people talk about a lot of the time when people are playing Alabama, they're beat before they even get off the bus. They have this mind game and this and that. That's not us. This is Florida State. So you've been looking forward to this game for a long time, and you know, it's a great challenge, but you also have a lot to prove, I think. Are you really on that tier of team that Alabama is? Well, here's your opportunity to prove it, and I want to see them not sleepwalk through the first half and get themselves in a hole. I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
I think it's fun if you're a bettor who likes to look at trends when you look at the idea that Florida State has never, under Jimbo Fisher, been a underdog on a neutral site in the regular season. In the postseason, they've been it twice. Florida State outright and against the spread is 2-0 in those games. They beat South Carolina in 2010. They ended up beating Michigan in 2016. Let's see if they can't make that 3-0. Well, we're going to find out soon enough. That's the good news, is that you can say this now and it's not, well, we'll find out in September. Well, it's almost September. It's not 2-3 months away. It's a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get you caught up all around the world of sports. This is Why You're Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake me up! Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
Let's start in Chicago, shall we, where the Cubs are victorious over the Pirates 6-1 at Wrigley Field. That brings the Cubs total to 70-60 on the season. Meanwhile, on ESPN, your national game, the Cleveland Indians going to Yankee Stadium and take a game from the Yanks 6-2. Baltimore over the the Seattle Mariners 7-6 at Camden Yards. The Nats all over the Marlins last night 11-2. Max Scherzer ended up dealing in that game. He's now 13-5 on the year. The Phillies at home over the Braves. My God, Atlanta, get some stuff together here. It's 6-1 Philadelphia. The Red Sox on the road with a W over the Jays 6-5 in the Great White North. Tampa Bay beats Kansas City 12-0 up in KC. It's Detroit over the Colorado Rockies 4-3. I'm as surprised as you are. Jordan Zimmerman gets the win for the Motor City Kitties. The Angels defeat the Oakland Athletics at home 3-1 last night. The Giants go beat the Padres on the road. Shut them out, actually. 3-0. When we come back, we've got plenty more to talk about. A little this or that action coming at you on the other end. It's Wake Up 4chan on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Of course, Jimbo Fisher held his first actual press conference of the football season, not just fall camp, yesterday. There was a couple interesting notes to get to. Of course, announcing that Matthew Thomas was slated to be back at practice that day. Now, of course, practice was closed to the media, and it appears as though it will be all season, so we can't confirm anything for you. I'd love to know. I think it would be my duty to tell you, but I don't. So, that being said, mostly what we can glean from yesterday, outside of a couple things from Jimbo Fisher, is, well, we got ourselves a projected depth chart. Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban both released theirs to the media yesterday. And, well, it's got a couple interesting question marks. No real surprises, but a couple things that you maybe thought for a bit or were on the fence on, and they were confirmed for you by bringing that out again. It's always worth noting that these depth charts are tentative, so this is subject to change. But I think the first thing that you immediately go to is when you look at quarterback and you see that backup, the number 2 spot is a 3-man race. JJ or James Blackman or Bailey Hockman. And, well, I guess that's good news for Bailey Hockman, who was maybe didn't have the buzz in camp that James Blackman did. And it's bad news for JJ Cosentino for obvious reasons. It confirms that this coaching staff maybe finally feels comfortable moving on from him if he hasn't developed, if he hasn't made the steps forward that they want. So that being said, DeAndre Francois is, of course, your number 1 guy. But for Cosentino, I mean, seems like a good guy. I hate that this has happened to him, but of course, you know why it's happened to him. You know why things haven't worked out. You know why things haven't moved on. It's just that he hasn't been a fit. It's been that simple. He hasn't looked good the times he's played. Whenever he's gone out there, he's kind of looked, the deer in headlights look in the Peach Bowl is kind of all you need to know. So we're going to see. Knock on wood, DeAndre Francois doesn't go down, but if he, God forbid, did, or if he loses his helmet, has to go out of play, I'm curious to see which one of these three guys gets trotted out there. I'm really, really fascinated to see that. If you were a betting man, Drew, not against Alabama, because I think against Alabama it's a given. JJ's going to be the guy in that game. But let's say it's midweek. Let's say October 14th against Duke. You're on the road against the tough crowd of Wallace Wade Stadium. Who's rolling in that game if DeAndre Francois loses his helmet or if Florida State's up big?
That's such a tough question because first off, those are two different scenarios. I'd say if you're up big, you might as well try it out, JJ. I think if you can, you're gonna try to keep Hawkman and Blackman on the sideline if you can. Now, if it's a scenario where you're on the road, maybe you're down a little bit, it's getting a little late, and Francois gets hurt, you got to throw out whoever they have the most confidence in. You got to do it, especially if your season's going well. You've heard so much buzz about Blackman, and I got to think it would maybe be him, which surprises a lot of people because I think Blackman coming in was the surefire project that we all thought had a really high ceiling. And he's kind of come in and just really surprised a lot of people. And, Hawkman had a good spring, but I don't think it would be JJ. I'll put it that way. If it was something that was a dire situation and it's later in the, especially if it's later in the year, I do not think it would be JJ. But I do agree with you right off the bat. There's no way you're trotting out James Blackman against Bama. I wouldn't think. But again, it's all about the level of confidence the coaches have, obviously. And you can see by this, the level of confidence they have in Cosentino is not high. This is a veteran guy who's battling for a backup spot that should have been cake. Because, most of them wanted to give Blackman and Hawkman a red shirt. But if it's to the point to where they can't even do that, one of two things might be true. It's either that Blackman or Hawkman are really balling out that much,
or you're that scared of what JJ brings to the table.
You're that scared of what JJ brings to the table. I'm going to go with the latter more than likely, with a little bit of mixture of Blackman and Hawkman exceeding a little bit of expectations. But that's a really good question. Like I said, I think later in the year, I'll lean towards Blackman just because of everything we've heard about him.
You wanted running back by committee, you got running back by committee. Jacquez Patrick is listed as the starter for the Noles, and then after that, Cam Akers or Ryan Green or Amir Rasul. A little surprised that Cam Akers is the only freshman you see here, and makes me eat my words a little bit because just last week I talked about what a great camp Kalen Laborn's having and how he could make an impact right away. Makes me wonder if they're going to redshirt this guy. I don't know, but it would make sense with as many options as you have at running back. But Patrick, Akers, Green, Rasul, you'll take that for and go to battle against just about anybody.
Yeah, because I think they're all going to get carries. I really do. Obviously for now, Jacquez is going to be the guy. We don't need to tell you how much you've heard about Cam Akers because everybody's heard about Cam Akers. I'm ready to see the kid play. I really am. Other than the spring game, I haven't gotten much of a taste of it, so I'm ready to see what he can do. The fact that I agree with you, I really expected to see Laborn's name out there. I heard a lot of people even talking about how Laborn and Akers just didn't seem too far off from each other. Maybe it's a playbook thing. Who knows? We understand how hard and complex this offense can be to grasp, especially to a true freshman. But you have heard a lot about Green and Rasul. I've heard a lot about Rasul, and I know Jimbo really, really likes Rasul.
He's a blur, man.
Yeah. So, the explosion that you got back there, again, not typically would you see a running back by committee of 4 deep and look and know for certain, hey, all those guys are going to get touches, but I really do think all those guys are going to get touches.
Well, it just goes back to a more traditional Jimbo Fisher-style backfield in that he's not going to blow out somebody's legs unless he feels like he has a truly elite special talent. And this isn't me trolling or having fun with this, but it's, to an extent, the anti-Alabama. It's not the I'm going to run your knees out, and by the time you're done here, you're going to be of no value to the next level. It's not the Trent Richardson train. That's not how Jimbo Fisher has done things unless he has a truly transcendent player like Dalvin Cook. Wide receiver, Keith Gavin, Naquan Murray, Auden Tate. No real surprises there. Tamorian Terry, Justin Motlow, George Campbell, the backups. I think you're going to see playing time for most of these dudes. It would not shock me at all, especially if George Campbell can stay healthy and he can stay consistently healthy for a season. I think it'd be a really big deal if you could get him on the field and make somewhat of an impact for this team, because that poor kid has had the roughest go of it since he's been here at Florida State. A really, really rough time with it. Just cannot seem to stay there. But Keith Gavin ends up in that third slot. It's something I don't think a lot of people are shocked by because, well, if you've been hearing any of the chatter about camp, he's looked really, really good.
Really, more than anything, it's a relief to see his name up there because we need him, and we need him to step up, especially with the unknown status of Devontae Phillips, and you don't really know what his deal is yet. Jimbo's talked a little bit about it, but not a ton. With practice being closed, this is the best you got until we trot out against Bama. This is what you know. And it's good to see that at least all of those guys performed the way that we hoped and thought they would enough throughout camp to be named the starters. You trust that. But out of all those, I'm a little surprised I don't see DJ Matthews up there.
Me too.
I don't know if that's subject. I'm sure it's subject to change. I don't know if it's an effort thing. I don't know if he's not grasping the offense or what.
He's fought that hammy injury.
Right.
Too.
I just a little surprised to see him not behind Naquan. My only the wide receiver is the only one I was kind of like, oh.
Time will tell on that one. I think he's going to get snaps by the end of the year, and unless for whatever reason he's just not coming along either injury wise or there's something behind the scenes that we don't know, and it's later in the season when they feel comfortable with him, and by that time they just redshirt him. I highly doubt that, just because of what he can bring and what he can do, and how you feel he can come to the table so quickly because he's so evasive and he's so elusive, and he's just got such a great second step, but. You look at the wide receiver core, you feel when you see it actually on paper, especially knowing that Keith Gavin has emerged, because we talked with Asher Wildman a couple weeks ago on the show. And of course, Asher covered him in high school, and he brought up a good point that it's one thing to be one big threat on a high school team where somebody like Felipe Franks, who of course was his quarterback in high school, can just kind of lob it to you. And more often than not, a 50-50 ball becomes an 80-20 ball just because you're a physical freak in high school football. That's one thing. Grasping an offense in college where everybody is big, fast, and strong is another thing. So to see him as a true sophomore grasp this and earn this number 3 role is a really encouraging thing. Elsewhere, you move to that defensive side. Well, actually, no, we'll tackle the offensive line real quick. Derek Kelly keeps that left tackle job. Landon Dickerson, no surprise, is your guard. Alec Eberle ends up being your center. We were talking a little off air about who that backup center is going to be. It is still Corey Martinez with Andrew Baselli maybe still nursing an injury. Cole Minshew at right guard. Rick Leonard there at right tackle. No surprises, but you still, you cross your fingers, right?
I'm a little.
You cross your fingers. You go, yeah, please work. Please work. Please work.
Yeah, you got to hope they're going to be there. You really do. And a lot of times, I think the thing that worries me is that sometimes that cohesion in the gel of the offensive line, it takes some time. And time is not something you have this year because you got Bama week 1 and you got Miami week 3. Both have good D lines, really good D lines. So you're right. It's pretty much just let's wait and see, cross our fingers. Hopefully this is better than last year type deal because you really want to see this team reach the expectations we all think.
You just know that this is that one thing that can keep them from it.
Right.
But I will say this: when you look at the backups, when you look at the second depth here, when you look at Josh Ball, okay, that's a good backup left tackle. Ethan Frith, not the worst backup left guard you can find. Corey Martinez, he's been in the program for a while, maybe not a superstar, but if he's needed in relief, you feel comfortable with it. He's seen the field. He's seen action. Brock Rubel as a backup, I'm okay with Brock Rubel as a backup. Maybe not always as an everyday guy or a starter, but I like him fine at right guard. Josh Ball, highly touted redshirt freshman. He's your backup right tackle. You feel a lot more comfortable with the depth here, and you knew you were going to when they signed that recruiting class not too long ago. But the fact that it's finally there and you can see that on the depth chart, if you're looking at the silver lining of this offensive line, that's it.
Right, and even after you lost a couple of guys, the depth's still there, which, again, like you said, goes to show how well we've recruited the position. And we just really hope we all really hope those guys get it for the team's sake, for Francois' poor sake, It'll be interesting to see, but I will say this. If you handle Alabama, you're going to feel pretty good going forward because that's about as good as a front seven as you're going to see. And another thing, just while we're over in that area, you see McKitty jumped up on the depth chart. Not a huge surprise, but, as a true freshman, impressive. You'd seen flashes of him throughout camp that looked really good. I thought that was a good thing to see.
Yeah, and, it starts to give more credence to a question we got asked yesterday or last week in our mailbag, and that is it maybe okay to maybe think about different positions for Nasir Upshur? Because, Pops hasn't exactly seen the field a lot since he's come to Florida State. I don't know what it is. For the last couple of years, it's just been that Florida State's loved what they've had at the top. They've loved having Jeremy Kerr around. They've loved having Ryan Izzo around. They've loved what they've had at the top. And now you're starting to see, there's a true freshman on this tight end list, and you're not there. That to me is the first legitimate, I'm a red flag that you really see with him. So I'm anxious to see. I don't think anything will come of it this season, but I'm anxious to see maybe in the next year or two what that comes to. Defensively, a little bit of a surprise. No real surprise with your starters on defensive end, and that's Brian Burns and Josh Sweat. But you maybe raise a little bit of an eyebrow when you see Jalen Wilkerson and Janarius Robinson on this list. Josh Kando not on the two deep. You look at guard, or you look at tackles. DeMarcus Christmas and Derek Nottie, no surprise. Walvinsky Ame, Frederick Jones. Those are your two guys. Marvin Wilson not there either. A little surprising to see maybe neither of them get there. Maybe not Wilson, even though Wilson's the freak, but Kando being the guy who's been around since spring, the guy who we've heard a ton about, the guy who literally in open portions of practice over fall camp was who Brad Lawing was using as an example for how to do drills. A little surprising to see that, but I think it just goes back to the credence that Jimbo Fisher is going to go with guys he knows, and he's going to go with experience that he can depend on when he has a season opener as big as Alabama.
It also just goes to show you how special guys like Cam Akers, Jimbo really feels that they are, because it takes a lot to throw a true freshman in a backup role. And you've heard a lot of good things about Samarian Terry as well, and good to see him out there. We don't exactly have a ton of wide receiver depth, but for Akers to be the backup like we all thought he was going to be, I think that's a good sign. Jalen Wilkerson, you heard, had a really good camp, so that's not too surprising. Like I said, you looked for Wilson and Kando. Those were the guys. Those were the freshman guys you thought you would see on there. You don't. For me, the most. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised of it just about how long he's been out. The Matthew Thomas or Emmett Rice at the Will side linebacker. That would be a little bit of a concern for me. I think I can speak for everyone saying we really need Matthew Thomas back.
Well, Jimbo says Matthew Thomas is at practice, and then of course you heard some of the weird rumors swirling around. Maybe he didn't walk in. Maybe this. Maybe so. I don't know. Florida State's going to make you sweat it out a little bit. No pun intended, of course, knowing one of your superstars on that defense. But I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know if this is a mind game. I know Ira and I chatted. I asked Ira about that yesterday, and he said he'd be surprised if Florida State played a mind game with it. But here's the thing. If he doesn't plan on him playing, you can't just go out there yesterday and say, yeah, he'll be back at practice today. He's either I don't know. I know that's terrible radio to just sit here and say I don't know. But honestly, I don't know what to think of this at this point.
I would tend to agree with you. I don't think Jimbo's a guy really who comes out and BS's a whole ton. He said for a ton that he does believe that, at least not to that extent. He said for a while that he expects Matthew Thomas to be back. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to believe him that Matthew Thomas is going to be out there on Saturday. Another thing that didn't surprise me not to see his name, but I do wonder how much we see him, at least in the first half of that Alabama game with Trey Marshall out, is Nate Andrews. Talk about a veteran guy that, you know, Jimbo should trust and knows the defense and probably knows, you know, a little surprising not to see him on here at all. Not a huge surprise, but again, I expect to at least see him in the first half of that Alabama game without Trey Marshall.
He'll get used, and I think the good news is that you feel good about Nate Andrews, and you also feel good about Lane and Westbrook as your backups. You know you have depth in that secondary. You know you have depth at those positions, especially in the middle part at free and strong safety.
I'm not sure anybody benefited more from last season's thin level of depth
than Ermin Lane.
Ermin Lane, yes, but A.J. Westbrook, I think he got so much better throughout the year last year. If you look towards that Louisville game versus where he was at near the end of the year, I think that really benefited him, maybe confidence-wise, you know, even just getting used to being out there. I think so. He's a guy that I agree with you. He's a very capable backup.
Yeah, depth everywhere except maybe that will linebacker. Fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we're going to play a little bit of this or that on the other end. Stay tuned. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table.
Shorty get down, good Lord. Baby got them open all over town. Strictly bitch, you don't play around. Cover much grounds, got game by the pound. Getting paid is a forte, each and every day. True play away.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Public service announcement for those of you maybe heading to Atlanta on Saturday. If you were interested in College Game Day, International Plaza at the Georgia World Congress Center is where game day is going to be set up. That, of course, starts at 9 a.m. I've never been to like our early version of game day for one of these neutral sites. I wonder how big the crowd gets early on, because I know, like, you know, if it's on campus, folks get there at 2 a.m. and students are out there camping all night. I wonder, neutral site games, do people hang out at these things from like midnight?
I would assume so. I mean, you see people all over the world camping outside to get their favorite Xbox or whatever they want. You would assume, I guarantee you there are people who are going to be camping out there ready for this, especially it being the opening week of college football. We've all waited for this for so long. In the magnitude of this game, I would expect it to be pretty packed.
By the way, if you're not headed to Atlanta, Madison Social, Central, Township, those are all the places to be to watch the Alabama game on Saturday, including at Madison Social. They have themselves a nice little promotion going on. Saturday, you can get yourself a pint glass with the quote, now made famous by Jimbo Fisher, "Orange is no good in Tallahassee." And by the way, if you buy that thing, you're going to get yourself a free select beer when you purchase that. All right, we don't have a ton of time for this, but I promised this or that. And I've put together, I think, a decent little set here. 5 interesting rapid-fire questions, going back and forth on these. I want to get your thoughts, Drew. And we'll start with this. The better kickoff weekend. This weekend that has what's literally being billed by the folks promoting the game as the greatest opener of all time, and a couple decent to okay games, or last year where literally from Friday night to Monday night, every game seemed like it was good. If you're an average college football fan, not a Florida State fan, put your garnet aside here, would you rather watch the weekend with the best opener ever or the best opening weekend ever?
last year. That's tough for me to say just because of the slot of games that I truly care about that are on display this weekend. But I would say last year. The overall it was game after game after game. Maybe not all of them turned out that way, but the matchups, I would say last year.
Everything was great. Oklahoma got ran off the field. That was fun. You think about Notre Dame, Texas ended up being a game that was worth nothing. Absolutely nothing in the sake of that season. One coach gets fired. The other team goes 4-8. That game was still awesome. Florida State Ole Miss as a game was objectively awesome. The only game that you could really say didn't live up to the hype are the two games that ended up involving the eventual national championship game. Alabama's game against USC was a wash, and Clemson's game against Auburn was terrible. But Georgia, North Carolina was great last year. And listen, I think we're going to get some good games this weekend. I'm particularly looking forward to West Virginia, Virginia Tech strikes me as that game that maybe means something to a division race or maybe means something to a conference championship, but not much outside of that. Except, no, because they're both out of conference foes. I'm a moron. Just ignore me. You get what I'm trying to say. It's not going to mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, you don't think? But it's going to be a fun game to watch. I think there are a couple of those on this schedule, but nothing quite like last year. I'm with you there. Better prove-it game. Michigan, Florida, or Georgia Tech, Tennessee. All four of those squads, something new to prove, and three of those squads more than likely breaking in a new quarterback.
Michigan, Florida. Michigan, Florida is definitely a better prove-it game. For the Gators, prove to anyone that you have a capable, somewhat competent quarterback behind center and that you're ready to compete with people like Jim Harbaugh. And for Michigan, a lot of people have written them off for whatever reason, saying they've lost all this and they're not going to be that good. I think Michigan's going to be a really good football team. I think to underestimate how well Jim Harbaugh recruits down there and how good of a coach he is, however you may feel about him, I'd say that's a prove-it game for both sides.
What do you think of what do you think of this little, I guess you could say, middle school war of
the spat between?
Name a starter.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not our problem. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough. Conference with more to prove to the nation. The ACC that they can stay at a high level, or the SEC that they're still at a high level?
The ACC. I think kind of what you're going to see what happened this year, unfortunately, is people just started to catch on to how good of a conference the ACC was last year because of the quarterback play.
And they lost a lot.
And they lost a lot of that. So if they were to still keep up near the top, even without all those quarterbacks, which by the way was the huge knock on the SEC the last couple of years, is they haven't had anyone at the quarterback position. But SEC is always going to get the benefit of the doubt. I don't think they really have much to prove to anyone. You could argue it, at least more people who follow college football at least a little bit more, they'll start to notice the downward trend of the SEC maybe. But I still think it's the ACC if you want to start being talked about as like the second best conference in the nation.
This is going to be an interesting year to me for the SEC. I'll take the other side because I think most folks who follow college football decently well see that the ACC's lost a lot of quarterbacks. And you still expect, you can't just suck. You can't have a lot of teams going 5-7, 6-6. You can't do that. But I think people realistically think they're not going to be as good as they were last year. I do think that most smart college football fans realize that. The SEC, when we marched past Alabama's schedule early last week with Tony Sakalas, who we're probably going to have on again sometime this week, the SEC West is where Alabama plays, and most of those games are garbage. Ole Miss is going to be terrible. I'm sorry. I'm not going to buy Mississippi State. Until LSU finds an offense, I'm going to be whatever on it. Until the East proves that they can even pose somewhat of a threat to the best teams in the West, I'm going to write the whole thing off. Until there's more depth in that conference and it's not Alabama, Auburn, and friends, whatever.
Speaking of Auburn, that's a really intriguing team to me. Just a quick little thing. I'm really interested to see how Stidham does there. I think that could be a good fit.
We're going to find out about them, and we're going to find out about Clemson really, really quick when Auburn takes that visit in week 2. You have any idea how much better this opening weekend would be if that was an opening weekend game? This would be such a better opening weekend. More likely, Florida wins the East, Miami wins the Coastal.
Miami winning the Coastal. It's tough to say. And the East is so trash. So, I mean, really, you could say it's a coin flip, but I still think it's more likely that Miami wins the Coastal. I do. I think that what you got in Mark Richt is a perennial 9-3, 10-2 guy who's going to win that Coastal a lot of the time. He's not going to do anything with it, but I do think Miami is more than likely going to win the Coastal this year.
It's one of those things. Do you believe it when you see it that Miami can actually win the division, or do you believe it that when you see it that Georgia can finally beat Florida? That's really the question that's getting asked here. Can Miami not stub their toe, and can Georgia not stub their toe? The ultimate Mark Richt conundrum. That's literally what it is.
It really is.
Can either team not screw up enough to get out of their own way and win the division?
I have little faith in either team, but I have more faith in what Miami will be this year than I do with Georgia.
Fair enough. Finally, I've got an interest. This one's a little out of left field, but I like it. Smaller school coach in Florida with more to prove. Lane Kiffin or Charlie Strong?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'll go, you know what? That's tough because you can look at it from both sides and you can say, well, Lane Kiffin's a proven offensive mind. We all know that. But Charlie Strong's a proven defensive coordinator and a proven head coach because he already was so successful at Louisville. So you know what? I'll actually say Lane Kiffin because he hasn't seen any kind of success as a head coach. And this is really his last shot, as it probably is Charlie Strong's as well.
I was about to say that.
So that's why it's tough. But
that's what makes this interesting is that this playing field is very, very even.
But, you know, Lane Kiffin is so unliked, and Charlie Strong is just the exact opposite. So Lane Kiffin, I think, I'll go Lane Kiffin's got more to prove.
Which is why you feel like Lane maybe has more of an uphill battle, but at the same time, it becomes a far worse fall for Charlie if he can't make this work. Because people are ready to write off Lane Kiffin. People are ready to move on from Lane. People are not ready to move off from Charlie. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday. Heck, when I'm at a certain sports bar in Tallahassee, and I am waiting for Mayweather-McGregor to start, and we're all watching that South Florida game, and you see them quickly fall behind 16-0. You literally saw the people that were watching football on the televisions, you saw them all get concerned. Like, Charlie, no. You're the only non-Power 5 team in this dang top 25. That talent is too good, and that's the other thing where you're kind of going for something different. Lane has a little bit of a rebuild job. Charlie got the keys to a Mercedes. Charlie got a thing that should literally be, if South Florida is not the group of 5 representation of the New Year's Six, South Florida season's a failure, right? Unless somebody just comes absolutely out of left field and knocks everybody's socks off, then they failed.
Yeah, I would say, especially with their schedule, anything worse than 10-2 is about where they should be in my mind. 11-1, 10-2. I think anything less than that, I would agree with you, would be a failure.
I'm not going to claim to have an infinite knowledge or an intimate knowledge of the Fighting Owls too deep, but I'd imagine a bowl game's probably the goal for Lane.
You'd think so. I know they've got a lot of really nice transfers coming in. And I'm really interested to see what Kiffin's going to do with that quarterback position. And you know, Franklin just transferred over as well. I still don't think he'll start in front of DeAndre, but who knows?
You know they can both recruit, but can they win? And that's where it gets interesting. We're putting a bow on it after this. Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you.
Follow up this or that, Drew, real quick. Lane Kiffin, in 3 years, is he at FAU? Is he a head coach somewhere else, or is he not coaching anymore?
I would say he's not coaching anymore.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for listening. Mike and Mike is up next here on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.